Hello, everybody. This is Jesse Beyer. I'm with Guarantee Rate, and today I have Matt Hernacki with Mr. Homes Realty with me. Mr. Homes Real Estate with me. He's based out of Palatine, Illinois, and what we're going to talk about today is pre-approvals and why pre-approvals are so important. But before we jump into the meat of the conversation, Matt, Happy New Year. How you doing?
Happy New Year, Jesse. Good to see you.
Virtually, right?
Yes. I don't think we've seen each other in person since this started.
It's been a while.
This is my 25th year in real estate, and we've always just tried to help people do what they need to do. So we like to say there's no games here. We'll give you all of your options. We'll talk about what you want to do with your move and give you all your options, and then work together, to help you find the house that you're looking for and make your move.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people out there, whether they're trying to buy or sell, there's a lot of different angles to what they want to focus on. But our topic today is pre-approvals. And I think that kind of translates to both sides, right? I mean, whether you're with a buyer and you're writing offers or whether you're representing a seller and you're accepting offers, these pre-approvals are pretty important, right?
Yeah, you're right from both sides. So they really help as a buyer. Do two things. It helps show the seller that you're legitimate, that you can obtain a mortgage, and the seller knows then at the beginning of the process that they're not going to lose time if for some reason you didn't get a mortgage. So it basically shows the seller that you can get a mortgage. That's the most important thing. But for you as the buyer, what's really important is it shows all your numbers. So I always recommend that you know your numbers, because you'll come away with a little template basically of, if the price is X, if the taxes are X, and in the case of like a townhome or condo, if there's a homeowners association, you put those three numbers together, and that combined with your down payment shows you where your monthly payment's going to come out. So when you know your numbers and you have that little template of price, taxes, homeowners association fee, every time you look at a listing before you even go see it, you can tell, okay, this one's going to fit in my budget, or maybe this one has like really high taxes for some reason, so that might push it out of your budget. And not to mention, sometimes lenders can approve you for more than you want to spend. So
Right.
it really helps you know your numbers. And it's, for some reason, I think it's a money thing. A lot of times people don't want to get pre-approved right away, but it's really the very first thing you should be doing to be prepared.
Right.
And I think we're going to talk about too how that's going to be really important in the coming market here this year.
Yeah. Well, it's a good segue. I mean, I guess before I jump into some of the nitty gritty around pre-approvals and asking you some in-field questions, let's talk about the market. We just wrapped up 2020. It's now early 2021. Can you tell us a little bit about how last year looked as it relates to maybe how this year's starting off?
Yeah. Well, it's always hard to predict the future, especially now, but one thing's for certain, and that is that there are not enough homes available each year for the number of buyers who are out there looking. So in our business, we call that the inventory. So there's just not enough homes for people to find and buy. So what we've seen even before the virus hit, this was true. So it made it even more extreme in 2020 that it was, if a nice home came on the market, there were several people there who would want to see it if that house is priced right immediately. And that is what is likely to continue, because there hasn't been enough new construction over the years, and there's always new buyers coming out, and there's not enough homes for all of them. If you look at it that way, simple supply and demand, I think, is the bigger deal than even the things that the virus has affected. It's really comes down to supply and demand.
Right. Like I think of what's triggering this increase in demand and lack of supply. And it's from the lending perspective, since interest rates are so low that home affordability, in a lot of cases, it's cheaper to own something than it is to rent it. So I think that's part of it. And I think part of it too is flocking to more space and a bigger, better work from home environment too. So that's probably a whole nother conversation about market and why things go up and down and what have you. But let's jump into the pre-approval conversation, right? So first of all, what is a pre-approval? And for those people who maybe are new to this or new to potentially owning a home, a pre-approval letter is something that your lender would provide, whether it's a community bank or a mortgage banker or broker, what have you. And what it is it is validating who you are as a person getting ready to get a mortgage, right? And we're gonna verify who you are, where you live, where you work, how much you make, the money in the bank, all that kind of stuff is basically being reviewed to ensure the likelihood to repay the mortgage, right? So I try to explain to people it's, the first step is the consumer fills it out and tells us, and then we go and validate all that information. And even after when we say validate, what does that mean? That means you tell us what you make. Well, we're going to ask for a pay stub and a W-2, right? Or maybe even a tax return. You tell me how much money you have in the bank for the down payment. We're going to actually look at the bank statement to make sure you do have what you're saying. So that is a pre-approval, is when someone who's collected the data and actually verified it. And the final piece of it is we do have a kind of a pre-underwriting engine or a system that will match up what the credit profile looks like to the guidelines and say, thumbs up, this fits the box, this is a loan we can do. So that's in essence what a pre-approval is. And so I guess the question now is, Matt, when you see pre-approvals, I guess give me some buyer side perspectives, seller side perspectives when a client comes to you with a pre-approval.
Sure. It can be a little confusing because even different, like you mentioned, banks, lenders, there's different ways to get your mortgage. You go to a credit union and they all title their letters different ways. So sometimes you'll see a letter that says pre-qualification, but that pre-qualification might be the equivalent of a pre-approval letter from a different lender. So,
right.
So sometimes it just takes some experience and asking the right questions of you guys as the loan officers of, what is the typical pre-approval for that company. And then it gives the buyer's generally okay. I'm speaking more to the seller side when we're evaluating offers that come in on a property, when they're all called something different. Sometimes we have to ask some questions to verify that what exactly does this particular pre-approval mean? Because in general they're all similar, but some might just take everything a little bit farther than others.
So just to clarify, you're representing a seller, an offer comes through, has a pre-approval letter. You're saying if it's not clear, if you don't know the institution that the letter is coming from, you'll reach out to the loan officer that did the pre-approval and ask some of these clarifying questions, like what did you actually do, or what did you look at or didn't look at?
Exactly. We want to know when we're deciding whether or not a seller should consider an offer, we want to know that the loan is solid. So we need to know, was it just a credit check? Was there any employment verification done yet? Where is it in the process? And it can be a little bit different every time. So the more that's done, when you turn that around from the buyer's perspective, the more that you do up front, when you find that house you really love and you have more of it done, we can tell the seller, hey, look, we're basically done here. You don't have to worry. And that eliminates a lot of stress and concern from the seller at that point, the more complete a pre-approval that you have.
Yeah. And probably, especially a first-time home buyer that is looking at this video and watching it, the reason why a seller cares so much about the financing is, they could put it on the market and it goes under contract, or they get multiple offers within a couple of days. So they know it's a good property, it's priced right. And then they commit to one, they can only accept one offer, right? So they commit to that one person. And then the loan process typically takes 30 days. But if you get into this, a couple of weeks go by, 30 days go by, and the deal doesn't go through for financing reasons, right? Nothing to do with the seller or the property. This has to do with the buyer. As a realtor, you're putting it back on the market. And from my experience, it almost seems like there's some sort of negative stigma around that house, like what's wrong with it, and it could impact future offers because of the borrower's financing, being the issue and nothing to do with the property.
Yes, that's exactly right. And it's not only a waste of the time for the seller at that point, they have to start all over. But it's also, as a buyer, you've wasted your time and you've spent money at that point in home inspection. and a couple other things. So you want to have a good lender and a good solid pre-approval, just so you're confident going into it that, hey, this is going to be okay, and that the numbers match what you want them to be for your monthly payments and your down payment. And when you do it backwards, that's when sometimes things go haywire. So if you're thorough up front and you do the proper planning, you will have less headaches and less hurdles getting from when you make an offer to a seller to the closing table.
Right. And I know we touched about it briefly, but just to be clear, so the pre-approval is kind of the standard that you want to get and what sellers are looking for, because it's telling the realtor and the seller that that an in-depth review has been done in advance. Now, the other terminology that's out there is called a pre-qualification, right? And so I think people need to understand the difference between those two.
Yes, that's a very important point.
Right. So, because if you get an offer with a pre-qualification and you're looking at another offer with a pre-approval, even if the pre-qual is higher, I mean, maybe I should just ask the question. If you have a pre-qual that's more than what a pre-approval is for, how would that play out? Like, how would that conversation with the seller go?
I mean, that's where it becomes a little tricky, because a lot of it is just wording. So I tend to believe that when the letter comes over and it says pre-qualification, people tend to think that's not as good as pre-approval, even though that particular lender, it could be the same thing.
Yeah.
It just might be the name, but that's why we have to go deeper into the details and really make sure, we know what it is. Again, from the buyer side, if they're running your credit, they're, the lender's checking and doing verifications, those are all the right things. So you're on the right track. When it's just a quick phone call and then they write a pre-qualification, then you really haven't got anything yet.
Right. Yeah, I'd say in our world, you fill out the application and we pull credit, we verify the information, and we do that automated approval. That's a pre-approval.
Yes.
A pre-qualification is maybe somebody who will only let us pull credit, but won't verify anything. So we're kind of taking them at their word on their income and their assets. And so, those obviously are not as strong as a pre-approval because we haven't validated anything. So I just want to make sure people are clear on that. It's not that a pre-qual is the worst thing, but if you're really in a competitive offer situation, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage.
Yes. It's no good if there's multiple offers. And if you think of it that way, where, you just did a quick phone call and you told them some numbers, but they didn't even run your credit or anything, you're really nowhere yet. You really need to get to that pre-approval level.
Right. And so I know we wanted to keep it short for sake of time. I just want to reiterate to everybody the order in which to do things. And of course, Matt, I'll let you, if you have any last comments you want to touch on, please do. But from a process perspective, you want to start with the pre-approval, know what you can owe, and then go out and start looking at properties. And I'm not saying you can definitely do your window shopping, but don't go to a real estate agent and say, let's hop in the car and go look around this weekend without having that pre-approval letter first. Because especially in a market where there's not much inventory, if you find that you like something and then you have to go back and ask for the pre-approval letter, by the time you can get the pre-approval letter done, there's a good chance that house could be under contract, right?
That's a really important point and a good one to end on. In the real world, once we're out there looking, if you don't have a good solid pre-approval, a seller might not be willing to even seriously consider your offer until you have it. So for example, if you're working with a bank, for instance, where they don't work on the weekend, and we find the house on a Saturday and you need to either get a pre-approval period or an updated pre-approval, you could lose that property because the house stays on the market the whole rest of the weekend and you can't even talk to the bank till Monday. So that's where, again, it all comes back to planning. So even though I think it's, again, because it's a money thing, people don't want to necessarily do it first, or they don't want to open that up until they absolutely have to, but it's all comes back to planning. And if you plan up front, you'll avoid all these little headaches that you don't even know are there, and you'll be able to jump on the right house as soon as you see it.
Yep. Okay. Well, listen, Matt, I appreciate your time. Once again, for those of you listening, Matt Hernacki, Mr. Home Real Estate, covers. I know you're not based out of Palatine. What are some of the other big areas that you cover, just so people know?
Yeah, primarily northwest suburbs, but we broaden out from there, Schaumburg, Palatine, Arlington Heights area, and then anything out to Crystal Lake and down to like maybe the Bartlett, Naperville, down that way. So
Right. So I'll go ahead and leave your contact info at the end of the video so people can get a hold of you if they need your help. But we appreciate your time and obviously your expertise. So good seeing you virtually. Can't wait till you and I can see each other again in person. Okay.
thanks, Jesse. Have a good 2021.
You too, buddy. Take care.
Bye.